Hey, happy WTF Wednesday. This is Liz Barnett Simmons. I am a fitness and food coach. I'm based in Northern New Jersey and Manhattan, although I mostly work with clients remotely all over the place. And WTF Wednesday is my little side project where I talk about a current health, wellness, nutrition, fitness topic of interest. Try to give you a little bit of science as well as my sort of professional assessment and recommendations, any experience I may have had. So if you've tuned in before, you know how this works. I'm really going to try to keep it to 10 minutes. I do try to include as much as possible, but I just get really passionate. If you can't stay for the entire live or if you missed any of it, I will repost it. So it'll be available for 24 hours until tomorrow, Thursday, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I also do blog recap. So I include the video on YouTube and I do kind of a written recap with any, links or notes that might be of interest. If you see me sort of looking off into the distance, it's because I have my computer behind me with all my notes. I want to make sure I don't miss anything. And since this is live, if you do have any questions, feel free to pipe up. All right, here we go. So today, WTF Wednesday, what are we talking about? We're talking about keto, the keto diet. The word keto comes from ketosis, which is a requirement of the diet. What you may have heard of the keto diet is it's high fat and you can lose weight. That might be the things that you've heard. Some people kind of compare it to a modern Atkins. It's definitely a little bit more than that, but that's one way to kind of start. So what is the keto diet? It really is a high fat, low carb, and low to moderate protein. I think that's one area where some people get confused or get stuck is it's not a high protein diet, and I'll explain why. You're really having 70% plus of your daily calories from fat and less than 50 grams of carbs a day, which is not that much. In order to stay in ketosis, which is the kind of the goal. According to Harvard Health, and this is a quote, in essence, it is a diet that causes the body to release ketones into the bloodstream. Most cells prefer to use glucose, which comes from carbohydrates, as the main body source of energy, especially your brain and your muscle cells, especially if you're doing like high intensity stuff. In the absence of circulating blood sugar from food, we start breaking down stored fat into molecules called ketone bodies, and this process is ketosis. Once you reach ketosis, most cells will use ketone bodies to generate energy until we start eating carbohydrates again. This shift from using circulating glucose to breaking down stored fat as a source of energy usually happens over 2 to 4 days of eating fewer than 20 to 50 grams of carbohydrates a day. Keep in mind that this is very individualized, the process, and some people need a more restricted diet to start producing enough ketones. So that's according to Harvard Health. Now, here's the thing to be really aware of. Avoiding carbs is essential for maintaining ketosis. If you mess up the ratio, if you introduce just a little bit of carbs into your diet, you're out of ketosis, you got to start over. You may see people like on social media using a blood glucometer to check their blood glucose to make sure that they're still under a certain range, or they're testing their ketones via different methods. You can do what's called a P-strip to see the circulating ketone bodies. What's interesting is that some experts kind of say if you're actually testing your ketones and you like are in ketosis, that might not be a good thing, because all that means is there's a lot of ketone bodies circulating around your body, but your body's not using them, right? If you're testing them, if you're peeing them out, then you're not using them. So that's kind of not the point. That's another story. Anyway, as soon as you have carbs, you're going to be out of ketosis. You got to start all over. The general idea is to train your body to rely on fat for fuel, both from your diet and from your waistline. And this is coming from me, right? If you're not eating carbs, if you're not consuming them, then if you're consuming fat, yes, your body will use that fat. But ideally, for most people, they might be approaching this from a weight loss perspective, and you're going to be starting to use your body fat to burn energy. All right. Your brain, as I mentioned before, primarily uses glucose for energy, but then it can run on ketones. So, as I mentioned, this is more than just 2019 Atkins. Hopefully, most people who are doing keto are focusing to some degree on food quality. I hope you're not just eating, bunless burgers with cheese all day. But both diets succeed from a weight loss perspective for what I think is a fairly simple reason. When you eat carbs, your body continues to use carbs to run efficiently, especially your brain and your muscles for certain types of exercise. Anytime you eat a carbohydrate, that spikes your insulin, right? Your insulin kind of helps manage your glucose levels and store excess glucose. And those fluctuations in glucose lead to more insulin being secreted, which is not great for weight maintenance or weight loss, okay? It promotes body fat storage. Here's the thing. Most people think like high protein, or maybe some people think high protein is ideal. In fact, protein is essential, but there's a caveat, right? If you consume more protein than your body needs, it actually gets converted to glucose. That doesn't happen with fat. So say you're eating a high protein diet, low carb, all that excess protein is going to get converted via a pathway called gluconeogenesis. Gluconeogenesis, meaning the genesis of new glucose from protein. And that's going to kind of, defeat that purpose if that's your goal. So by limiting both protein and drastically reducing your carbs and then consuming fat, that's how you're going to burn fat. So that's really important. Now, some people get worried when they hear ketosis. I think they get confused with something called ketoacidosis, which is a very serious condition. It's something to be worried about, but not for most people when it comes to in terms of the keto diet. Ketoacidosis, or diabetic ketoacidosis, is a life-threatening condition that results as a complication of type 1 diabetes or other conditions, okay? It occurs when there are both dangerously high levels of ketones and blood sugar present at the time. So if you are not eating carbs, if your blood sugar is stabilized, you don't have to worry about ketoacidosis. I'll keep coming to this though. Everybody's really individual and unique. And even if you don't have a condition that you're aware of, you don't necessarily know what's happening, sort of inside your body. You might not know if you're predisposed to, having a condition or some sort of issue, right? So I think that's why it's always important to work with a qualified healthcare practitioner. As far as weight loss and cravings go, I think it's important to understand, keto or otherwise, that a calorie is not really a calorie, right? Yes, calories matter. If you eat too many calories, you will gain weight. However, if you just think about it this way, 100 calories worth of avocado, worth of eggs, worth of kale, worth of a cheeseburger, they all look different, right? When you eat them, you feel different, more or less full, more energy, less energy, and they all affect the body differently. So fat is naturally satiating. It helps quell hunger, and especially when you combine that with some protein. You'll likely eat less overall if you're eating fat, right? There's only so much fat, if it's high quality, that you can consume, right? Also, if you're focusing your diet on fat, there's kind of less food to choose from, right? If you're just like, I don't eat bread, then, or I don't eat pasta, then you don't eat those things, right? And there's kind of less options, fewer options. So that might actually lead to you eating less overall. If you're just like, well, this is all I can eat, I'm not hungry anymore, I'm not having cravings. So that's another, I think, side benefit. I'm just reading my notes, making sure I'm not missing anything. So here's the thing. What is keto helpful for? What do people say that it's helpful for? Definitely weight loss. As I just sort of alluded to, stopping cravings and hunger, brain focus, mental clarity, avoiding or overcoming brain fog. So those are kind of like the lifestyle benefits of keto. But keto has also been used for over 100 years to treat epilepsy, especially with kids, also type 2 diabetes. And there's even research being done on how keto can be used in conjunction with chemotherapy and other sorts of therapy if you have cancer, right? So there's some really serious health benefits of following a keto diet. And there is a lot of research that I'll share on the blog post about that. Many people, from a lifestyle perspective, might also combine keto naturally or intentionally with intermittent fasting, which I've also talked about, right? Again, if you're only eating fat, you might not be as hungry, you might not be craving food as much, so you just might eat less overall. So that's another reason that it can be effective. Even though you're eating fat and people are assuming that fat has more calories, per gram, fat is more satiating, right? So yes, a gram of fat has 9 calories. A gram of carbs has 4 calories. It's really not that, much difference in terms of gram per gram, but a gram of fat looks different than a gram of carbs. But just gram for gram, it's going to be more satiating overall. Who should do keto, right? If you've tried to lose weight before, if you have a significant amount of weight to lose, if you're sedentary, if you've tried calorie counting specifically and that's not really working for you, either mentally or just logistically it didn't work, if you feel like you are mentally prepared and logistically prepared to take on the keto diet, right? High fat, not much else. You got to be ready to do that. And also perhaps if you have a neurological issue or one of those other health conditions or concerns I mentioned, and you're working with a qualified healthcare practitioner, you might want to explore the keto diet. However, it is so important that you are limiting the carbs, because if you have carbs plus fat, that's going to get you fat, right? It's really important that the carbs are being limited just as much as the fat is being increased. who should avoid keto, or some things that you should look out for, right? If you are under stress, this is really important because keto or any kind of extreme diet is a stress to the body. So if you're already under stress, just general life, if you participate in intense exercise, if you're sick, if you have a compromised immune system, keto might not be for you. If you tend to have kidney stones or kidney problems, you want to just be aware of that. A lot of the times on keto, people maybe are not having enough water. Their electrolyte balance is off. They might be eating too much protein. And so kidney stones or kidney issues can come up. Also, if you have a genetic predisposition, which is why it's so important to know what's going on. Other things you need to worry about if you're doing keto are other mineral levels, especially magnesium. I think what's really big that I don't hear people talking about enough is your gut biome. If you're eating really high fat and not much else, you're probably not getting fiber or nutrient-dense, low-starch vegetables, and that's super important for your gut biome. I've been doing a ton of research on your gut biome and how what you eat affects it, and eating more fat and reducing your fiber intake is going to drastically change your gut biome. In some cases for the better, right? But you may have, issues because of that. So I'll talk a little bit more about how you can sort of mitigate that. I mentioned if you have a history of kidney or liver issues to watch out. Pregnant women, you should not be taking on any sort of intense diet or drastic regimen like this. Other people that should watch out, if you have a history of disordered eating, maybe not a full-blown eating disorder, but if you feel like you've spent your whole life kind of like dieting and being aware of it, maybe another diet's not for you. More simply, as I mentioned before, it can be difficult logistically and mentally to follow. So you just want to kind of keep that in mind. If you don't have the time or access to cook or prepare your own food, if you have a roommate or a husband or a wife or a family and they're going to be eating differently, like these are all going to be challenges if you're trying to participate in the keto diet. So what do I think? What do I think about keto? What do I think about diets in general? I think it's so important to keep in mind that everyone is biologically unique, that everything is based on your inherent genetics, which I'll talk a little bit about more, on your lifestyle, on your diet otherwise, right? On your exercise or lack thereof, and your stress. There's a huge difference between men and women and diets and keto. There's a researcher, Dr. Stacy, I think her last name is Timms, who does a lot of work with women and exercise and diet and nutrition. And what's interesting is all these research studies that are not done on mice, that are done on humans, are often done on men, right? And we are different. We are hormonally different. We are emotionally different. We are biologically different. So I think that's important. Women's hormones fluctuate, and going drastically low carb can be a problem. I'll talk a little bit about that. So just while we're there, when your estrogen level rises, as it does when you're in a certain point of your cycle, your body's ability to access glycogen is reduced, right? So when estrogen rises, and this happens in the ovulatory phase and then peaks during the luteal phase, it reduces your body's ability to access glycogen, and it spares carbohydrates, making it so that your body's using more free fatty acids. Now, this sounds good, but if you're an athlete, you don't have as much energy, you can't work out as intensely, and your overall capacity is diminished, right? Also, cortisol, which is your stress hormone, is increased, and that impedes your recovery. So let's just pretend you're doing CrossFit and you're doing keto. Never heard of that before, right? And you're a woman and you're working out really, really hard. So your ability to perform and recover is going to be hugely, drastically reduced, right? So you may actually want to increase your carbohydrate intake, even if you follow a generally low carb diet during that part of your cycle. That's just like one way that this gets a little bit sticky, right? Going back to what to keep in mind. I think everybody, no matter what your situation, male or female, athlete or not, everyone could benefit from eating less processed carbs and sugar. Sugar is omnipresent in our food system. It's in foods that we don't even know that it's in. And that is a fairly new phenomenon, right? Sugar used to be available only kind of seasonally, like when fruits and berries were available. And now it's like you can get bananas from Costa Rica on any day you want just by going to Whole Foods. And if you're like me and you're from the Northeast of the United States, that's like not a food I should be eating so much of, because just sort of genetically, evolutionarily, it's not something that my body has been, evolved to handle. So I'm not saying bananas are the worst food ever. I'm just saying, maybe stop worrying about if you need to cut out all carbs and start thinking more about what I call smart carbs. Everybody can benefit from including more water, fiber, and nutrient-rich low-starch veggies in your diet. So things like leafy greens, cruciferous vegetables, and other vegetables like mushrooms, asparagus, cucumber, tomatoes. Like, those are not going to get you fat and sick for the most part, right? Everyone can also stand to benefit from including more healthy fats in your diet. They're important to aid hormone production and regulation. Again, very important for women, your brain function, and managing inflammation. If you are sedentary, you could probably benefit from eating less carbs overall, right? So you might not need to go keto, but just eating fewer carbs. I work with a lot of my clients on how to sort of figure out what that means for you. And as I just mentioned, smart carbs. So what's going to be a better option? A sweet potato, quinoa, some beets, or a bagel, right? It's really not that hard, guys. You really don't have to demonize an entire macronutrient just because it's trendy. You just have to be a little bit more thoughtful. On the flip side, if you're very active, you might actually need more carbs, as I was just mentioning in terms of women. Go for those smart carbs, which are minimally processed, fiber-rich, nutrient-dense, and not fried or in a cracker or chip or cookies or bread, right? Things that are as close to nature as possible. If you're going to do keto, I think it's important to vary your sources of fat, right? So avocado, olives and olive oil, nuts and seeds, but keep in mind they do contain protein and carbs, butter, ghee, or other dairy if you tolerate it. Keep in mind that animal protein naturally contains fat. So unless you're eating low-fat cheese or boneless, skinless chicken breasts, which sounds disgusting to me, that animal protein is going to contain fat, and you want to include that in your overall sort of nutrient composition. When you are eating protein, you want to get it from well-sourced animals, pastured, free-range eggs and chicken, grass-fed beef, sustainable seafood. Keep in mind, and again, this is another topic, another discussion, the word organic doesn't really mean much. I mean, it means something in terms of how the animals were fed, but it means very little in terms of how they were raised. So organic basically generally just means the animals were fed organic produce, which is important, or organic food, I should say, but it doesn't say anything about the quality of life that the animal had, and that's also, a big factor in how that protein is going to be processed in your body. So I think you should avoid as much as possible processed animal proteins and fats, those kind of weird fats like canola oil and hydrogenated oil, those shelf-stable fats. Those are not ones that you want to be consuming a lot of. Everyone can also probably stand to benefit from loading up on those non-starchy veggies for fiber and nutrients. If you're doing keto, your diet should not revolve around keto treats, like keto pancakes and keto muffins and keto this, that, and the other thing, right? Just eat real food. And you might want to consider a multivitamin as insurance. I'm not always a fan of multivitamins, but if you're undertaking a diet like this, you really might want to consider that, as well as some other supplements. Again, you want to work with a qualified healthcare practitioner. Drink all the water when you're doing keto. Just everybody drink all the water. You might need to add some electrolytes to help with mineral balance. And you really got to keep in mind that there's an acclimation period, right? So you do need to be strict, at least for a certain period of time, to see benefits. And you may want to lay off the intense exercise. So if you're that CrossFitter I'm talking about, you might want to take a little active recovery break and deload and see how your body, reacts. Keep in mind that if you're a female, this might not be for you. You might want to sort of do what's called cyclical keto. It's not technically keto. It's probably more like cyclical low carb. Overall, I think the best diet is one that you can stick to. If you're someone who likes a short-term challenge or a jumpstart, keto or just low carb might give you the focus, energy, and quick weight loss results that you're looking for that will motivate you to keep going and keep, using those healthy habits. If you're someone who has a problem with carbs, and by that I mean you need to have carbs, you need to have dessert, you crave them, you can't stop eating them, you can't say no. For some people, having a rule like I don't eat those things, at least for a short period of time, can be beneficial. And finally, keep in mind, I've been alluding to this over and over, we are also biologically different. I strongly feel that the future of dieting will depend on genetics and personal testing, things like your gut biome and your hormones. For example, just telling you a little bit about me, I know from all the testing that I've done that I am a fast metabolizer of caffeine. I am likely not lactose intolerant. I respond best to strength and power workouts versus endurance. That's kind of like what I'm naturally better at. And on the flip side, I am genetically predisposed to have excess body fat. I'm also genetically predisposed to diabetes, which my dad had. And I know this both genetically and because of my gut biome. I am more prone to musculoskeletal injuries, which I also know from personal experience, and I'm more likely to be a poor sleeper. So these are all things I have to work with to try to get myself, ahead. And although I received all this information from testing, again, I also know from personal experience and observation. So I think overall, the tests simply confirm what you may already know or have an inclination of. You got to know yourself. You got to pay attention. You can't just enter into any of these diets or exercise programs or whatever blindly. You can't just follow the rules and cross your fingers. You have to be willing to do the work and pay attention. So that was my little talk about keto. I wanted to focus a little bit more on the sort of lifestyle and practical application aspect. Again, it's the biggest fad diet going, and there's a lot of controversy, but there's also a lot of research that it can be beneficial for things like weight loss and therefore overall health and these sort of specific conditions. But I think the most important thing is to find something that works for you and do it as consistently as possible. Thanks for listening. That definitely wasn't 10 minutes, but I'll keep working on it. I will do a nice recap on my blog, and I'll post this so it'll be available for the next 24 hours. Guys, have a great Wednesday, and thanks for joining.